Today I'm going to be trying Widow Jane's 10-year-old bourbon for the very first time. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, today I'm taking a look at this Widow Jane 10-year-old straight bourbon, we'll get onto that in a minute, for the very first time. This is a relatively premium bottle here in the UK, but it is also pretty available. Sometimes we talk about more rare and exotic bourbons, and to be frank, it's a case of, well, you'll get one if you're lucky. This you can pick up in a lot of places, but it's not the cheapest, but it's also not silly. But there is another bigger issue. Now, Widow Jane comes straight out of Brooklyn, New York, which isn't the first place you really think of when you think about American bourbon. And they do have a host of things that make it uniquely their own, but they did not do any of the distilling. If you do a bit of research on the internet, you'll find a lot of people saying it's actually just MGP, which I think stands for Midwest Grain Products, which is basically a massive American company making huge quantities of, well, anything grain related. That is whiskies, vodkas, you name it, but also bread produce, stuff like that. So anything, literally anything grain related. And I have no doubt there is some MGP whiskey in this bottle, but also there's definitely some other stuff, because on the back of the bottle it does state KYTNIN bourbon bottled by Widow Jane Distillery. And just so you know what I'm talking about, it says it right there. But yeah, that is basically saying Kentucky, Tennessee and Indiana, I'm guessing, bottled by Widow Jane. Now, I think MGP is Indiana. Kentucky, well, that could be a lot of people. There's an awful lot of Kentucky whiskey. And Tennessee, well, let's be honest, mostly associated with Jack Daniels. It's probably not theirs, but there are a few other big distilleries in Tennessee which it could have originated from. But anyway, it is their own personal blend. They've done the blending on this, so it's a straight bourbon, but it's a blend of straight bourbons. And in terms of whiskey lingo, I'll be honest, I've already got a bit confused about where that leaves it. But anyway, it meets the mark for straight bourbon, but it's a few different straight bourbons, and it comes in at 45.5% or 91 proof. They do this in batches of, and it does say on here, 5-barrel batches. So there's a good chance if you pick a bottle up from this, it's going to be different. If we look on the front of the bottle here, you can see the batch numbers and bottle numbers of this particular bottle. It is a nice looking thing. Mine is batch number 625, bottle number 102, and the date is 2022. Now, I've had this bottle for just over a year now, and to be honest, I don't really know why I've not opened it. One of the things I think about it is that, well, I bought it because I didn't actually taste it. I smelt it because I was driving, and I thought it smelled pretty good. I'm going to pick a bottle of that up, not really realising that it was indeed a blend. I didn't know an awful lot about it at that time. It was something that you don't really see in the UK all that often. And, well, yeah, it was north of 80 quid, which, you know, in bourbon terms in the UK, not horrific, but also certainly not on the affordable side. And look, for something that they didn't necessarily make themselves and they just put together, there's always a question mark over whether that is really worth it. On the back of it, it says, reviving the lost art of marrying the finest whiskies, Widow Jane 10-year is our signature bourbon, hand assembled in Brooklyn using the richest and rarest straight bourbons. I'm going to go out on a whim and say this is probably not a combo of the rarest straight bourbons, because, well, it would cost a fair bit more if it was. But one thing they do have going for them is that when they proof this down, so they buy barrels in at barrel strength, and then they proof it down to that 45.5 or 91 proof using water from mines in the north of New York, about 100 miles away from where they are. And those mines are where the company gets its name. One of those mines is called Widow Jane. So it all makes sense. It's got a nice story, but is it really worth a whopping 82 quid? I think is the cheapest I've found it, and so on. So let's find out, shall we? Let's break it open. So we should say that 10-year-old bourbon, actually, there's not a lot of 10-year-old bourbon just for sale everywhere in the UK. There's the 10-year-old bullet that you can get, which is pretty nice, I have to say. I tried that for the first time a couple of weeks ago. But other than that, I can't think of one offhand where I'm like, yes, if I wanted a 10-year-old, I'd go and pick X up. So, yeah, here we go. Fantastic cork pop, so they're winning already there. In the glass, nice orange hue to it. I'll be honest, when we're not comparing side by side, bourbon tends to look like bourbon. It's kind of mid-range, maybe a touch darker than some, but in general, looks pretty nice. It's got quite an intense hue to it though. It's very orangey. But yeah, as I say, looks nice enough. The aroma then. Oh, that has... Okay, I remember now. I remember why I picked it up. The aroma on that. It is rich, it is complex. Immediately hit with a load of that corn. Barbecue, toasty char from the barrel. Little bit peanutty in places. The ethanol is coming through. It's got that slight disinfectant twang to it, which, hey, it happens a lot of the time. It's not always a bad thing, but it is definitely there. And a kind of maple pecan. It's definitely kind of got that sweet, rich vanilla caramel treacle, like it's a kind of mapley syrupy thing going on that you do get in a lot of bourbon. And it's not got the fruit element though. It's got quite a nutty note, quite a woody note, quite oaky. Very oaky, in fact, in terms of compared to things I've tried so far anyway. But yeah, smells, I'll be honest, very, very nice. So let's give it a go. Cheers. I wanted to be mean and say it's not worth it. They didn't make it. It's a load of... Wow. I really dig that. And I've seen some of the reviews of this and people were not that well charmed by it. But the peanut brittle thing that this is giving off, for me personally, is absolutely delicious. It's warm, it's toasty, it's sweet. But that nutty, serious nuttiness is what I'm taking home from this. And, well, I just adore it. But I am, though, struggling to pick out a lot of much else. There's some warmth in there. There is some sweetness. But I'm not really getting individual notes just on a quick pass. So let's try and break it down just a little bit. Right on the tip of the tongue. Hot, boozy, ethanol. It's not too spiky. It's not too prickly. And there is something of a little floral edge sat in there. It's not super obvious what it is. I'm probably going to use my get out of jail free card here, which is honey, which is just sweetness and floral, generally a bit nondescript, but yeah, that's all it really is reminding me of. Then over the mid palate, big, intense oak. Like, it's woody. It's real woody, and it's something that you don't get in a lot of the more generic, bigger brand name bourbons in the UK, at least. Like, that intense woody profile, even if you go and pick up something like Woodford Double Oaked, because of the way that that's done, the oak is much more sweet. It's much more, well, I think I described that one as a creme caramel. Like, you're not getting the raw, not quite bitter, but certainly, I guess, almost kind of toasted and vegetal element of the wood that you're getting in this. It's there. I love it though, to be honest. I think it's really setting it up for something special. It's transitioning from that slightly floral sweetness into something a bit more robust and, well, I guess just more complex and more of a refined palate kind of a thing. I don't think if you're just starting out on your bourbon journey necessarily it's the way to go, because that might shock you just a little bit. Then onto the back of the tongue. Interestingly, that is a flavour I've never picked up before. And it's slightly medicinal, slightly cleansing, but it's distinctly more soapy actually than, well, anything I've ever tried, I think. It doesn't stick around, it doesn't stick to the tongue, but if you concentrate on it, if you let it sit at the back of your palate, yeah, there's a bit of a soapy vibe, and I'm not sure what would cause that. Again, it's not bad in the overall experience of it, but it definitely is there. But the aftertaste. Ethanol, boozy, rich fudge, maple syrup, and then crashing in is that big, nutty, I'm sure someone would say peanut shell dust or something. incredibly specific. I have no idea what peanut shell dust tastes like because, well, frankly, I don't live anywhere near a peanut factory, but you get the idea. It's just full on, savoury, intense, rich, oily, delicious nuttiness, to be honest. And yeah, for me, it is just absolutely fantastic. Just sat here with this bottle, is it worth 80 plus quid? Yes, if you like the sound of the flavours, but you could easily come away quite disappointed. But does it really stack up when we compare it to something a little bit cheaper? Shall we find out? The bourbon that this Widow Jane reminds me the most of from my collection I've got a decent amount of experience with is this Wild Turkey Rare Breed. And I'll be honest, I really wanted to pitch this against Wild Turkey 101. It's kind of been our benchmark for a while now in terms of is something worth it or not, because that's such insanely good value. But I do think that the Widow Jane is just so much more rich, so much more intense. It actually makes sense to put it up against its big brother. Now, if we were to put it up against the 101, the scope in terms of you could probably buy 3 bottles of 101 for 1 bottle of Widow Jane, and ultimately it feels a bit of a disingenuous comparison. This though comes in at around the 50 to 55 quid mark, so it's not half the price of the Widow Jane, but it's definitely a decent chunk less. So let us find out, is it a match? Visually, and I said I thought the Widow Jane was looking on the darker side, actually that Rare Breed I think is actually a touch darker, a few shades darker. It is though, of course, coming in at a whopping 58.4%. It's barrel proof, so maybe in that regard we shouldn't be surprised, but it's a big old difference. 45.5 or 91 proof, let's say, versus 58.4 or 116.8 proof, which is it's a gap. It's a big old gap, but let's see. Immediately, the Widow Jane feels less intense, a bit more soft. It's a big hitter, that Rare Breed, it really is, but let's give it a go. Cheers. Oh, big, rich. It is nutty, loads of leather in there. I've covered this loads of times, we're not giving it a full review, but that is a slap round the face in comparison. It's definitely bigger, richer, more complex, much breadthier, deep notes in there. But, and it is really hard to give you a balanced opinion because the ABVs of these are so imbalanced. We know, because we've tested it, that Rare Breed watered down tastes like Wild Turkey 101. But I still think this Widow Jane is offering something a little bit different. Yes, it's maybe not as intense, but it's almost like a showpiece of a few key bourbon notes rather than a bigger breadth of them as the Rare Breed is doing. And on pure paper, on pure mass, if you just want an experience, well, the Rare Breed is gonna win on price. Like, it's not a competition. But at the same side, they're making a hell of a lot less of the Widow Jane than they are of the Rare Breed, so something to take into account. And as something different on your shelf, if you like nuttiness, if you like that nutty, intense flavour, yeah, I've not found anything else yet that really gives me that. So it's not a bargain, and it's questionable as to whether it's worth its RRP. But if you've already got a few others like I have and you like the idea of it, I don't think it's an absolute rip-off. It is a little bit more boutique-y. They're not making the whiskey, which does kind of start to cause a little bit of a problem in my mind. It's not loads less in terms of cost than you can get a bottle of E.H. Taylor small batch for. But again, that's quite a controversial one. Some people love it, some people really don't. So, yeah, if it was me, and I've got a choice between 2 bottles of Widow Jane or 1 bottle of Rare Breed and 1 bottle of E.H. Taylor, you can guarantee I'm going for the Rare Breed and the E.H. Taylor. But if you've already got them, I'm finding it hard not to like this, if I'm totally honest. It doesn't have any, I guess, massive, obvious, like, it's doing this part much better than anyone else. I don't think it is. But it's an art in blending, and the blending job they've done on that is absolutely fantastic. So it is a big thumbs up from me. I can't quite justify it, but I do really, really like it, and I think that is all that really matters. Have you tried Widow Jane 10 or any of their others? Let me know in the comments below and let me know what you thought, please. But otherwise, that is all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe if you will be so kind, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.